Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the stream. My name is Ariana. I'm the co director of the Consent Academy, a Seattle based international nonprofit that aims to promote consent as part of everyday life. And wherever you are, whatever you're up to today, I hope you're having a good day. Very excited to be here with all of you. Um, Hello, Paladin Hulk, Krellin, Ditibron. Welcome, welcome. And I just want to point out Paladin Hulk's amazing joke. Paladin Hulk wrote, "If you replace every plank in the friendship, are you and Theseus still buds?" And Krellin's response is also very good. "Joke's on you, Theseus has no friends." It's lovely. So, if you're joining because I wrote a particularly spicy title, welcome. We are going to be talking today about why friendship, especially friendships outside of childhood, is mostly we're going to focus on, can be really difficult. And we're going to look at some causes of this, both in terms of like some tips for how to make friends, because I think it's like a skill that a lot of us don't have, but also what are some things that make it so that it's actually really hard. Hello, Muscled Karma. Welcome. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about some things, no surprise, related to infrastructure and how infrastructure also makes friendships harder. Also, if you hear banging in the background, it's because my cat Babby loves to go to all of the litter boxes and like not when he's just used the bathroom, but to just go to them and like try to scent mark on them. And he makes a lot of noise. Anyway, let's get started. I have only two memes today before we get right into it. These I just thought were pretty funny. So it says the top gets injured in front of his friends, they videotape it. So I think this is, both something that's very real. Like a lot of the videos we see on social media can be kind of bizarre sometimes because it's like, why were they videotaping at this moment? And like, why are they videotaping rather than like trying to help? There are times where like it's very good, right? Where like there's enough people there to help and like having documentation is really useful. But also, I think that uh, there are some things that really encourage us to sort of be focused on different things these days. Like how things appear on social media, what's going to get you the most attention, what's going to make you go viral. I know some people from high school and college when I look at their social media profiles, and I can see that like they have carefully curated who from high school or college they're still friends with, um, based off of like what looks the most appealing on uh, social media. Or I've even had things where like I've been at a party and pictures were taken, and I know that the only ones that were posted were the ones that like create a very particular image. This does also come back to that book that I've been reading called You and Your Profile: Authenticity After Profilicity, which is by a German philosopher, and it's very good. I don't necessarily agree with everything, and sometimes the sort of idea I think can be taken a little far. But it's also, I think, very relevant. Okay, so then the next one here is an image of someone scowling and looking confused, and it says at the top, "When your best friend posts, quote, 'I have no one,' me, what am I then? A potato?" This one I also really like because it does bring up another really important point, which is that a lot of the time our perceptions of friendships are not always matched. Like we might feel like we have no close friends, and then people who consider us to be close friends might not even realize. And a lot of that can come down to some of the things, this can come down to differences in personality and like needs that people have, but it can also be a situation where um, there's not enough communication going on, where maybe, one person wants more, say, togetherness, more time spent together, more frequent casual hangouts. And the other person is really, okay with things being very scheduled and all of that. But, and it's not to say that either way is a problem. It's just coming back to even the idea of consent frameworks, where like, if this is a new idea for you, I'll explain it a little bit. Consent frameworks are this idea that we all have like a sort of framework in our head for different types of consensual interactions. We have expectations for how we're going to interact with, say, strangers on the street, family members, friends versus acquaintances, coworkers, our boss, etc. And that we kind of walk around with a default. And then when something else happens that kind of shows us that with this particular person, the consent between us doesn't really work within this framework, we tend to update it and start to individualize it more as we get closer to people. But we do tend to have like default ideas. And, you know, you might have a default idea in your head about like spontaneity of hangouts. Like for some people, they're very comfortable with someone like just showing up at their door. But if a lot of online discourse is to give any indication, not even the chili incident, which we talked about a few weeks ago, for a lot of people, that's no longer the case. That would feel uncomfortable to them, which means it's not exactly what they want to consent to. But having more explicit discussions with friends, sort of define the relationship conversation now and then. It doesn't have to be like super formal or intense. Hey, kitties. It can just be chill, but just checking in with each other can be really helpful, because you may have a mismatch in your understanding of the friendship. People can think that they're a lot closer and they're or not as close as the other one thinks, etc. So just two small memes for this. Krellin, you are a potato. You know, I've never seen a picture of you, so I can't actually debate with you about whether or not you're actually a potato. You might be. And then Paladin Hulk, discovering one of your friends isn't actually a friend is rough. And that is also actually very true. I've had people where I definitely considered them friends. And like in my head, I was like, yeah, we're definitely friends. And like, then it seemed to be like for them, it was something that was completely contextual. Like we were, you know, work buddies, but like they didn't actually consider me a friend, or we like, which is not to say that you can't have friends that fit different contexts. Like I've had friendships where, for example, what we had in common was that we really like to play board games together. But outside of that, it didn't really work. But we kind of talked about it, and that's one of the ways in which it made it better, where we were like, yeah, we don't really seem to get along that well outside of board games. So like, let's just play board games together. And eventually that ended up falling apart with some of them because they were really bad at any deception games where they had to like have a secret identity, because it would just, they would have like these really strong tells and they would always think I was metagaming. And I was just like, you will literally like not stop blinking every time you're the bad guy. So like I can't help it. And the fact that I recognize, like, you'll just be blinking. Anyway, setting that aside, that, well, not even setting this aside, let's talk about that for a second. Like, we had different needs. And sometimes it's okay to not be compatible in a friendship, to like start to, you know, investigate, could we really be friends? And then you get to a point and you're like, nah, it doesn't really seem like it works that way. One of the things that makes, or isn't good for us together, one of the things that makes this harder though, is that we often don't actually talk about it. We don't actually talk about like, hey, I noticed that you're not inviting me to as many things recently. Can I ask if anything has changed? Or, you know, I'm really enjoying, you know, I tend to try to do these things, but I know that I'm a weirdo. But I'll have friends sometimes where I'm like, hey, I really like you. And even though we live now on different continents or whatever, I want to invest in this friendship with each other. Can we try to maintain this? What does that look like for both of us? Yeah, let's see what you all are saying in chat. Paladin Hulk, you say, discovering one of your friends isn't actually a friend is rough. I've been playing RPGs with a group for over 2 years, and I sure thought they were my friends. Turns out no. That's really tough, especially when you have like consistency and like investment. And yeah, I'm sorry. That's difficult. Krellin, well, my potato bona fides are that I'm Irish on both sides of my family, and my father's side came over during the famine. Okay, I mean, are you like, then a sickly potato that is inedible? Or are you like a potato that's going to be turned into delicious food? Or are you a potato that's just going to be left into in the ground? Let me know. Okay, so let's talk about this. If you do any kind of internet search, if you just type in here, sorry, it's a little cut off at the top. Let me fix that. I used a search engine and I typed in, why is it so hard to make friends as an adult? And there are just countless reviews. You've got big, think pieces. You've got even like BBC articles. You've got Medium articles. You've got like people asking on Quora. You've got, the American Psychological Association. There's just a lot, right? Like Psychology Today, Reddit, even like their websites, things like betterfemalefriendships.com and Lifehacker and stuff, right? Like this is a thing, right? For a lot of people, it is a thing. And it's not something that I want to say is always universal, but I would say in a lot of the sort of in certain parts of the world, it's very common for people to really struggle with lack of friendships, or friendships that are not very fulfilling or are very like circumstantial. And if like the circumstances change, the friendship just completely ends. But, I would say that a lot of people are struggling with this. I did repeat the searches in things like French, Japanese, and German, and I found a similar level of results, and a similar number of people talking about like, why is it so hard to make friends as adults? This can really vary. I know if you ever get a chance to watch, there's this cute YouTube series that I like to watch to practice my German, and it's Easy German. And they're just really, they're very easy to understand, but they have several videos on how to find friends in Germany. And one of the things that they talk a lot about is that it can be incredibly, as it says here, difficult to make friends with people if you don't, hi Jan Punkt, if you don't have friends from childhood. Like, some of my partner's coworkers were over for a dinner. We were going to have them cat sit for us, so we always like to treat them to dinner. And they were talking about people that they had known since kindergarten. I literally do not know anybody that I knew in kindergarten. Not at all. 1 second, I need some water. But in this video, and I'll put it in the chat if you're interested, they talk a lot about how a lot of people tend to prioritize the friendships that they've had for a very long time. Oh, thank you, Aradin, for the subscription. Yeah, I mean, Krellin, I try to think about if I really have any friends left from college. Most of the people that I knew in my like younger days that I'm still friends with are people that I dated. And the reasoning behind that is not because like I still hold a candle for them or anything like that, but often I think because we developed enough closeness with each other, and many of the times when we broke up, it was fairly amicable, or it was like very much because of the sort of circumstances, like living on different continents and not really having the skills for a long distance relationship or whatever. We just changed. And so, most of the time it's because there was enough of a foundation there. And with a lot of other people I knew in college or university, yeah, it's kind of difficult. But here in this video, they talk a lot about how people really tend to prioritize the friends that they've had since they were small children. A lot of people are already kind of like full up on friends. And one of the reasons why this is also possible, which is related to a structural issue, is that how often are people expected to move? So I know that in the United States and Canada, it's very, very common for people to be expected to move multiple times in their life. And it can be, hey, Aradin, it can be really difficult because that takes you away, Paladin Hulk. Paladin Hulk, I really, if you ever become a stand-up comedian, I will wholeheartedly support your career because I think you are pretty funny. um, and every time you're expected to move, even if it's not that far away, um, it disrupts community. It disrupts the ability to maintain community. And especially if you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of public transit in between these different places, that's going to make it even harder because you might not have a car, you might not be old enough to drive, it might be too expensive to do it regularly. I went to for the end of high school, for my last years of high school, I went to a regional charter school. And that meant that even though I developed friendships there, they were harder to maintain outside of class or outside of school hours because they might live like a 40-minute drive away from me. And so that meant that there was a huge expense to maintaining that friendship in terms of time and money. And if you're in a place where you're expected to maybe even move multiple times pretty far away, it can be really difficult. I moved a lot as a child. This is one of the reasons why I know for a fact, like, I don't know anybody that I knew when I was in preschool, because I only ever I went to one, my parents put me in like a private religious preschool. And then none of us went to any sort of like similar overlapping elementary schools. But then I moved so much as a kid that it didn't really stick. So that's one thing, right? Because sources of moving can be things like cost of living going up, especially if you're renting, your landlord charging more money, and then you have to move, which helps reduce community. And then things like job demands. We're often expected to move for jobs, but also to go to university, we can be expected to move really far away because, with the exception of universities that are in big cities, a lot of universities are not like situated in centrally situated population centers. I kind of repeated myself there, but they're kind of spread out all over the place, especially if you ever look at like a map of colleges and universities in North America, you can see that they're kind of all over the place. And because getting in can be very competitive, people will often apply to a wide variety of places that may take them all the way across the country. Now, the other thing that I want to say to this, the cultural aspect, is there is a bias in American culture, at the very least, against maintaining friendships from childhood. Like, I remember as a teenager very much getting the message, enjoy these friends while I have them, because if you're the kind of person who has the same friends you've had since high school, that probably means you're like not educated or very worldly and you like are all these bad things. And no one actually even directly said this to me. It was just implied over and over again in daily life, such that that was pretty much the message we all got. And so right after we graduated high school, very few of us actually put an effort to maintaining friendships. Or if we did maintain friendships, often had more to do with proximity. Let's see, Paladin Hulk, you say, oh, that's a completely different way to be funny. I just react to what's being said, and that's not possible in stand-up. You have to be funny all on your own with no input. Aradin, I don't know that I have any IRL friends anymore. And Paladin Hulk, I was real happy to not see most people from school anymore. And Jan Punk, do you agree? So this is also one of those things, is like, I want to talk about the balance here, because on the one hand, yes, I think that this messaging causes us to not prioritize developing long-term friendships, which also means that even when we're children and structurally making friendships is slightly easier because we have more interactions with the people who can become our friends. Now, I say this as somebody who like regularly struggled to have any friends, and I had several waves in my childhood of like all the people that I was friends with sort of saying they didn't want to be my friend anymore. when I was in elementary school, I got on the bus like the first day of second grade, and the girl who was my best friend told me I couldn't sit with her and that she didn't want to be my friend anymore. And I had no idea why. And it turns out it's because her mom didn't like who my mother's family was, for numerous reasons, which probably included the fact that they're not white. And then there were, in middle school, I had a group of friends who then all sort of disowned me and started bullying me because they realized that I also liked girls, and they started to accuse me of being like creepy, or said I was a predator because I ever went to a single sleepover, even though, like, one, I wasn't interested in any of them, and two, I would never do anything like that. Like, what? And then in high school, I changed high schools in the middle because of a number of reasons, but one of them was bullying. I was really heavily bullied. But it's also true simultaneously that there are clear messages that we can get a lot of the time that, like, we shouldn't be prioritizing these friendships long term, because eventually you're going to leave this place and you're going to go off to college or get a job, and then you're going to make your real friends. But one of the things that makes that difficult is if we don't learn the skills of maintaining friendships, because that's the thing, is like, how to make friends is one thing, but how to then maintain a friendship across time, across changes, across like being maybe sometimes at different life stages. Like, some of your friends have kids and some of them don't. This can be really difficult, and it's, a really important skill that we don't often develop. So yeah, continuing. What are you saying around an NA is real big on the implied cultural norms? Well, I don't know what does NA mean here? North America? I'm not sure. Let me know. In Paladin Hulk, you have the heart cannon or hype cannon, and then two band-aids. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I don't have any hang-ups anymore from school times being hard. Exactly, Aradin. Growing and developing friendships is an entirely different thing. Yeah. So let's go back and look. So there, you can also do a Google on how to maintain friendships and also get a lot of results, because this is a question a lot of people have. So, one of the things I wanted to say earlier, but I forgot, that I really want to stress is, if you don't have many friends, or if you're struggling with friendships or loneliness in general, you're not alone in this. The other thing I really want to say is, like, there are 8 billion people roughly on the planet. There's not going to be anything about you that is that weird. Because even if only a tiny percentage of people do or think or have or whatever X, Y, or Z thing, that's still going to add up to a lot of people. So, like, anything that exists about you, there are probably at least 10,000 people in the world who have that in common with you. Probably more. So the point is here is that, like, I want to just tell that to, like, bolster everybody's sense of self and self-esteem, because I think that especially when you struggle with friendships, it can really exacerbate, self-esteem issues and self-hatred, and really cause us to beat ourselves up or start to think that there must be something wrong with us. Exactly, Krellin. There are now 8,001 in a millions on the planet now. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you know, anything that you have, any thought you've had, anything you've ever done that you're like, oh, am I so weird? Also, I really like on the side, you can just see my cat's little feet. um, but yeah, there's a good number of people who are going to have that in common with you. So, like, rest a little inside in the knowledge that you're not that weird. And if you really want to be super weird, I'm sorry, because it's difficult. to achieve that. All right, so then as I showed you, how to maintain friendships is a common search. Why is it so hard to make friends as an adult? How to make friends. There's even like a very popular best-selling book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. My cat, oh my goodness. They have this, they love this heater so much, and recently they will like get so asleep uh, that they just fall off. Jan Punkt, that is a great question. The answer is yes, because the way I usually do my Tuesday streams is the first hour, we read an article and chat about something, and then the second hour, roughly, right? Like sometimes these streams go long, often they go long. We play some Stardew Valley and chat about it, because I think Stardew, sorry to shake my desk, I bumped my knee on it. Stardew Valley has a lot of good stuff, because we're going to talk about some infrastructure things that are really good in Stardew Valley, and an example of how we could do things like create better public transit, but also better sort of like urban planning for rural areas even. Okay, so let's continue. So we have even Masterclass has stuff you can learn about how to make friends. And let's just look at this article a little bit, because I think it does have some good information. And it says tips for cultivating adult friendships. Making new friends can feel like an uphill battle, especially as you enter adulthood. In high school and college, you have consistent access to social spaces conducive to sparking new friendships. And on this note, when it comes to things like college or university is one of the only times in anyone's life in which you are going to be around majority people who are your own age, while also being in a space where the majority of people are sexually active and the majority of people are unmarried. And this is one of the things that can make it so that people have this really strong idea that like you have to meet your life partner in university, and if you don't, like it's all over. And one, that's really not true. It's more a time where I think it can be like good to get practice with certain things, because you have a lot of potential like practice partners for like sex and romance and friendship. But also I think that statistically, the whole point that like the divorce rate is 50% is a little misleading, because more than 70% of all couples that get divorced got married when one or both partners was under the age of 26. And that has a lot to do with how personality and cognitive functioning continue to develop up until the mid-20s. Adolescence does not really end until the mid-20s, and we continue to change our personality quite a bit. After the age of 25, 26, personality tends to be relatively stable, though it can still be changed by, active efforts or things like disease or brain injury. But you can also like change your personality if you want. It just takes time. But it's, yeah. So then let's see here. Krellin, you said, tying into Stardew Valley, the reason why you don't have any IRL friends, Aradin, is because you don't give eggs to random people every day. I love it. Krellin, it's not 50% anymore. That was the peak, and that peak was right after no-fault divorce came around. So it was bolstered by a bunch of unhappy marriages ending. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Thank you, Krellin. Paladin Hulk, I wonder if there are any stats for what percentage of couples break up at some point in their life. Gotta be over 90%, right? That I'm not sure. I mean, like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think that in terms of like giving yourself the best shot for maintaining a long-term romantic relationship, being a little bit more like established in yourself, a little bit more aware of sort of how you fit into the context of life, and everything can be very helpful to reducing, the risk of things going wrong. And we'll look at, and maybe today, maybe a future episode, some discussion of skills that apply really to both relationships, romantic and platonic. Okay, So, as you get older, you must make more of an effort to find these sorts of environments yourself. Learn more about how to make friends and keep them. And then we've got an ad. And then how to make friends. It might seem difficult to meet people at first, but the reality is almost everyone would be happy to have another great companion in their lives. Keep these tips in mind as you try to make potential new friends. And Aradin, you said Krellin. Yeah, I mean, I don't keep them around, so after a bit, they would get be rotten. And I don't really think that would help make friends. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're trying to become friends with Krobus or something. Attend social gatherings. Okay, so the first off here, like this is often easier said than done, right? Like if you don't have any friends currently, it's going to be hard to get invited to go to places first of all. And like work, mandatory fun at work, it doesn't really count. Though you can develop workplace friendships, especially if, people are willing to spend some time with each other outside of work. Though that's, a mixed bag. Sometimes people really like it, sometimes they don't. Okay. But it says here, if you keep to yourself all the time, you'll find it next to impossible to meet others. And that's true. There's a really good meme. I should have found it for today, but it's basically like, if it's meant to be, my soulmate will just like teleport into my living room. And it's, that's like legit. I think a lot of us kind of can be that way. Also, Jan Punkt, I totally agree. I'm also neurodivergent, and there are ways in which getting out of the comfort zone is really nice for me personally, but there are also ways in which I think it can be really getting outside of my comfort zone. It's not very well supported socially. Like the way a neurodivergent person might explore that is likely to be labeled weird or strange because, we don't necessarily know how to conduct ourselves in these new situations. Or we could just get really overstimulated and overwhelmed. Krellin, I love it. Yeah, prayer, please, Lord, let me win the lottery. Lord, you got to meet me halfway, buy a lottery ticket. Paladin Hulk, given how small my comfort zone is, I think I should be applauded for my ability to stay in it so long. It does take talent. It does take talent. My comfort zone is I don't understand social norms, and so I'm always comfortable until after the fact when I realize, oh no, I must have crossed some social boundary that I didn't realize was there. Also, I don't experience shame, I think, the way most people do, and I don't have any concept of like what is and isn't normal to say or share. Not like about anything, like there are rules that I know, and like, I taught interpersonal effectiveness for like a decade. So like there are things that I know really well, but also like, yeah, I don't know. It is just, my brain is just weird. Anyway, attend social gatherings. Okay. Try going to bars or local music venues. So this comes to the first aspect of a structural issue I also want to talk about. So not last week, but the week before, we talked about third places and friendship. So if you don't remember, let's just look at it. A third place here is, oh yeah, also, sorry, let me give you the link to this masterclass article if you want it. And then third places on Wikipedia. Arad, you said workplace friendships also tend to be assumed to be of lesser sense, maybe because people are assumed to switch jobs often. Yeah, there can be that, but also I think a lot of people feel like, oh, you got to get away from work. But the thing is like, I feel of several minds about it because I think that developing friendships in the workplace can be really useful to making work less difficult, and it can also, if you have a deeper sort of sense of connection with each other, you are likely to have an easier time sort of weathering difficulties and setbacks than if you really only see each other as like cost benefit analysis kind of interactions. I also think that, workplaces where you're going to see people the most. You're going to spend like a third of your life there, and then a third of your life can be spent with, say, like your romantic partner and your kids. So it's like almost an equal percentage of time if you have a romantic partner and kids, or family in general. So it's one of those things where I think that it can be worth it. But also, you could just work in a shitty environment, or like you could just be working with a bunch of people that you don't get along with. Like, if you're, a LARPer or a furry and you don't want to out yourself at work, but that's your like main hobby, well then, that makes sense that that would be a huge barrier. Or even if you're just queer and you don't want to out yourself, or neurodivergent. I mean, like, I tend to really lead with that. I tend to lead with like, hey, I've got ADHD and a bunch of other things, so I'm gonna be weird. Just to let you know. But that's also how I like to do things. Um, yeah, or on this list seems to be made by someone that finds making friends easy, or they are more extroverted, and so figure that you just need to get out there. This is a really important point too, which is that, like, how do I want to say this? It's a yes and also a yes but. Yes, most articles are like about this are going to be written from a very much the perspective of not even just extroversion, because I think that oftentimes we're not actually talking about extroversion versus introversion. We're talking about like outgoingness versus shyness, because I'm very balanced between introversion and extroversion, but I come across as like someone who's very extroverted because I'm very outgoing and very sociable. But I need a lot of alone time, or my brain melts and like I can't think anymore. I need, a space that is just for me. I need to like play video games and recharge after social interactions. But I also really like social interactions, but I can be really drained by certain types, but some of that is normal, like typical, like kind of an everybody thing. But anyway, the point is that also the other point is, if you want to make friends, it's not going to just happen, right? Like, it's never going to be one of those things where like just wishing for friendships means that they're going to, it's like the joke Krellman made of like praying to win the lottery but never buying a lottery ticket. If you never are putting yourself in places and situations to meet people, it's going to be harder and maybe impossible. Now, you can have a lot of agency over how you structure it. This article that says like just go to bars. Well, some people don't like bars. Personally, I like bars if they turn the music down and it's not super loud, because I have an auditory processing disorder, and I have basically no ability for my brain to prioritize like or hierarchicalize incoming auditory data. So like all the noise kind of comes in at the same priority level into my brain. So if I'm in a noisy space, it is basically impossible for me to actually hear what someone is saying to me and really process it. I can if I get like really, really close to them, because like I tend to have to like really put my ear in close to a person, but I can get really overstimulated in those places. Sometimes it's fine. Like, I used to like to go to bars to do drinking and drawing. Like in university, there was a small group of other people who were in the art department, and we would just like take our sketch pads and go and draw people, or we would have like a theme or something, but we weren't talking to each other. We bought a pitcher of cheap beer, we were drinking it, and we were like saying, okay, for the next 2 hours we're all just going to sit here and draw, and then at the end, if we want, we can show each other what we drew. But that was not me trying to actually like process all that other stuff. So I didn't get as overstimulated, and I often put earplugs in. Anyway, you can have some agency over where you're going to cultivate friendships. Now, the thing that's tough is that a lot of us, myself included, have really benefited from the internet as a friend-making tool. I have a lot of my friends at this point in my life are people I know almost exclusively online. But the problem with that is that it means that it doesn't mean the friendships are fake or less important or not deep, but it means that other things that tend to come along with friendship, such as like being able to be there with each other in difficult, quiet moments, or to sort of just like have the proximity to each other, the ease of building social interactions, it takes away a lot of possibilities. But we have control. You don't have to just always go to like bars and clubs and stuff. Okay, but talking about infrastructure, specifically, third places is an idea in sociology, but also in urban planning, and like the sort of philosophy of urban planning, refers to the social surroundings that are separate from the usual two social environments of home, the first place, and the workplace, the second place. Examples of third places include churches, cafes, clubs, public libraries, bookstores, and parks. So the reason why I bring this up is a lot of us live in places where there are no third places, or if there is a third place, it is far away and you have to drive there, and there's not likely a lot of choice there. There's a research paper that I'll share later that looks at specifically like case studies of several third places in the areas around Boston, Massachusetts. Boston ends up being Boston and Cambridge and the sort of the surrounding satellite cities are pretty good because they're old. And so a lot of it was built before the advent of the automobile. So it is less car-centric urban planning, which means there's more mixed use, there's more integrated public transit, there's more human scale communities. But the thing is if you don't want to make friends with your coworkers, or even if you do want to make friends with your coworkers, one, you might have the same problem I had at my second high school where you could live in completely opposite directions from the workplace, right? Like the workplace might be a centralized place, but you could each be an hour drive in opposite directions. But also, you might not have any place to go with these people, except for maybe like in an overpriced sports bar that's like near your workplace. I don't think so. I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, Paladin Hulk, you said, yeah, same experience. People getting upset with you for no discernible reason is scary. Oh, sorry, I missed Jan Punkt. You said, even if you didn't grow up in a neurotypical environment, makes you feel you did something wrong. When you haven't, in my experience at least. And then Paladin Hulk, you're saying, yeah, same experience. People getting upset with you for no discernible reason is scary. There always were reasons, but I could never see them. Yeah, I definitely relate to this. I also definitely, I joke around a lot that the comedian Adam Conover and I are like long lost twins. But the thing is like I was one of those annoying, like, even though I'm a woman, as a kid, I was like one of those annoying nerd dudes who would just be like, well, actually, to like everything people said, because I didn't understand that people were not interested in like knowing things or like didn't want to not walk around with incorrect information. And I would just like say like, oh, but like you might want to know this thing, or like I would share a lot and people didn't like me. I like really struggled until after university to like start to figure out how to not do that to people. And it helped with making friends, but it's also difficult. Okay, Jan Punktu said, oh yeah, I know that. I like calling friends sometimes, but usually after a few hours of talking, I tend to think this was fun, but I need a week by myself now. Yes. Haradin, oh yeah, I guess what I meant was more for some people just going to a bar itself would be incredibly hard, let alone actually talking to people. Yeah. Muscled Karma, I don't think bars are a good spot for actual conversation because there is the undertone of hooking up there. Yeah, that's also difficult. This is one of those things where when you don't have a variety of third places, your options become a lot more limited, right? Like here, barbershops, especially in the Black and Latin communities in North America, tend to still be really good community building third places. And this also all comes down to moving all the time, lack of third places, also means that we don't tend to build community with each other, which also means things like solidarity, mutual aid, and even like collective action become harder. And if you watch the previous streams, you'll see that we talked a lot about how we have more autonomy as a collective than we do as individuals. It's easier for us to advocate for a more consensual world as a collective than it is as an individual. It's one of the reasons why unions like can create better boundaries between a person and their workplace, for example. And yeah, the issues around alcohol. But if and bars get a bad rap, I think, sometimes as well, because it depends on the bar. There can be very, very different characteristics of bars, and this is one of the things that I think it is. Sorry, this is so bright. Which one is it? Is this the one? No, this is not the one I'm looking at. This one. Sorry, I read these papers and they're long. Third place is in the social life of streets. And here it is looking at two different, I need to turn the brightness down. This is honestly too much for me. Different neighborhoods in Massachusetts around, not far from Boston, Central Square. This is Cambridge. And you can see here, like, one, this is very walkable, very human scale, right? You have the train station, a subway. I've been to this subway stop many times. There are lots of buses around here that serve these sort of surrounding neighborhoods. This, Massachusetts Avenue is all mixed use. So some of these things are going to be grocery stores. Some of these things are going to be like commercial on the bottom, residential on the top, or commercial on the bottom and like offices. And you can see here that there's like going to be a lot of different types of things mixed into here. So we have here this block that has multiple third places here. And let's see, there are a couple other places. One other map I wanted to look at. Is this one it? Yeah, and then this is another one, which is like a little further out, right? Like not, like this is Coolidge Corner, Harvard Street, and it's in Brookline, Massachusetts, Brookline is a little further out. So it's like a suburb of Boston. And you can see even still, even though things are still a bit more spread out, there is some centralization here, which makes it easier, one, for people to have those spontaneous interactions with each other. I mentioned previously, but there's a lot of research that says that one of the best ways to sort of solidify friendship is like you have structured regular meetings. So like you need to sort of like see each other often enough. And there's usually like, it depends. There's some different research that says you have to hang out X number of times in like a intentional way before you move from like acquaintances to friendships. I'll have to find that some of those research papers that talk about that. I think it's like 15, but I don't remember. But one of the other things that's really important is chance encounters. So like if I'm out at the grocery store and I run into, say, my landlord, my landlord literally lives next door to me, and we don't see each other a lot. We have very different schedules, but if we run into each other in a different context, even though, yes, there is still like a power differential between us and like the relationship will always be that of landlord and tenant, it still is something that like serves to create a better, sense of the interactions between each other in our minds. And that is really aided by things being kind of centralized. This is also something that could really help infrastructurally with rural areas. I know I'm kind of jumping a topic a little bit, but one of the reasons why suburbs and rural areas can really struggle to not be so car-centric and car-dependent is because something like the grocery store or the public library or the school might be in opposite directions from each other. So there's no centralization, so it's very hard for there to be any kind of public transit that would bring people towards the center services. or a public transit hub in the middle that could take them to a nearby city or other sort of larger population center. But it also means that there's no gathering point for the people in the town. Now, again, I'm really not trying to say like you have to be friends with all your neighbors, even if they're like, racist assholes and like, or curmudgeons or whatever. No, but that's never what I'm saying. But having any sense of like awareness of each other and more than like just the most superficial, like passing relationship with the people in your immediate vicinity who live around you creates more security and creates more like, we talked about this a lot in previous streams, so I'm going to set that aside. And let's see here. Rodden, you said, it is also why CEOs and companies like to try to pit groups of people against each other, as that way they're easier to manage and handle than if they were united. Yeah, for sure. Muscled Karma, there are TTG taverns here that are great meetup places. Yeah, I mean, I think, video game and board game cafes can be really nice. Things like places where people go to play, tabletop games or, trading card games can be really useful because that does bring people together. And this article here, sorry, did I paste this one? No, I'm going to give you all this article so you can look at the research yourself. But this other one is it's much more economics and marketing. But it does also, sorry, it's like so zoomed out, have a lot of really good information on, oh, hello, thank you for the following, Nadi Mahinasaj. Or is that Nadi Mahinas OJ? Oh, yeah. You want to offer a promotion? Cool. Anyway, Anyway, this is much more, yeah, I know that's a bot. I got excited and I was like, oh, it's a bot. So let's just, how do I delete this? I don't know how to delete that message from here. Anyway, this other research paper here is really good because it has, it looks more about at third places as community meeting spaces and how, thank you, Krellin. Thank you. Community meeting spaces and how it also supports local businesses a lot. And there's a really good chart in here. I like this article a lot, even though this is very focused on the sort of like economic aspects of things and profit and sort of marketing. I still think it had a lot of really good information in it. In here, there's a good point that places often become meaningful to people because of their relationships with people living there, such as friends, acquaintances, and relatives. The humanistic geographer Yi-Fu Tuan believed that a place becomes meaningful when people identify a place as a sign of something beyond itself. For example, a person may identify a barbershop as a place to satisfy a consumption need. Another person may identify the same barbershop as a home, referring to a place in which he or she finds refuge and a sense of belonging by being among other people. And this also really matches up well with things that we talked about a while ago about a sense of place, like urban design and a sense of place and a sense of belonging. The more there is a sense of place, the more you feel like not only are the public spaces for public use, that you are allowed to be someplace, that you are invited to be there, to linger, to interact, one that will make you feel better about your experience of being there. And if you're curious about this and you weren't here for those streams, I did label them things like sense of place, and it was just sort of like a epoch where we talked about sense of place a lot. And all of the old streams are both on Twitch, and I'm slowly sending them over to YouTube. So a lot of them would be on there as well. Oh, Krellin, I hope you're having a good nap.
Did Tiburon, I really struggled to make friends in LA because I'd meet someone at a special event, we'd exchange phone numbers, but it was so hard to spend time with them again because they'd live on the other side of the city and didn't necessarily have a lot of time or strong motivation to cross the city to hang out with an acquaintance. So this is a really good um, point, which is that also if it takes you a really long time to get across a city or to get from like where you live to where a potential friend lives, that's going to become a barrier. Even if the willingness is there, people just have busy lives. And so the more you're able to build friendships that are geographically close, or the better the public transit is, the easier it'll be to overcome these things. I mean, like, I think at this point you all know that I'm like obsessed with trains and buses and streetcars. Like, I'm just like, yes, public transit will make the world a better place. And also like mixed use stuff. And, if you don't like cities, I'm not saying that you have to live in a city. There are other options. Yes, exactly. Public transit is cool if it works. So this is also one of those things. Is like a lot of times we've made people think public transit is really bad because we've like systematically underfunded it, which means that like a lot of public transit that we have to interact with is outdated, prone to breakdowns, dirty, and like the New York subway system is a hot mess. Whereas like I used to live in Tokyo, and the trains there move more people every day than New York City's trains do. And they're amazing. They have their own problems, absolutely. But I don't feel disgusting being on them like I do in New York City. Boston stuff is like so so. It's pretty clean, and you don't see as many like scary people on the subway, but uh there's just in New York City, there's a lot of like subway masturbators. There's a thing I saw a lot of. Um, but it is prone to breakdowns and delays. Carlene, you said our city council has spent the past several months fighting over bus fares. We're currently experimenting with fareless buses. That will definitely increase ridership. I hope it goes through. A route in public transit is fine. It is people on it that's the real problem. Yeah, so this is also one of those things is like there are a lot. That's a whole issue. Actually, I'm gonna not reply to that too much because like I could have a whole like probably 4+ streams, Tuesday streams just on like the cultural norm building and maintenance of community standards on public transit and sort of like how are norms created? Why are some cities, maybe even in the same country, not even that far away from each other, have it? Why do they have more pleasant to be on public transport than others? A lot of it is going to come down to, wealth inequality and funding and like how supported are the train drivers or bus drivers. But yeah. Um, Jan Punktu said, for example, where I live, the bus comes once per hour and sometimes not at all. Yeah, this is also one of those things where I'll talk in the future about not so much today, but more in depth at some point on like the public transit in suburbia, like suburban areas, and how it doesn't have to be car centric, and you can have really good public transport, but then also public transit in rural areas. There are limitations for sure. Like one of the biggest things is, to have public transit, you need to have people to move, but the amount, the population density that you need to have, use um, sort of like financially viable public transit is not as big as most people tend to think. But the smaller the population center, for example, or the population density and the more diffused it is, the less frequent it will be, which is one of the ways in which, having something like one or two dedicated lines in a really rural area is not actually going to be as useful because it means that you're likely to have most people unserved versus like dynamic routes that change depending on the sort of needs of the people, or on-demand public transport can also be a thing, but that you have to wait for. But it's better than nothing. Okay. No, no worries, Jan Punkt, about digressing. I love digressions. Krellin, it's been going on all year. We have increased ridership and supposedly increased security incidents, though the incidents per rider is down. Yeah, I mean, that's, none of that surprises me. Aradin, this is also why streams sometimes go long so that Aradin can play the game a little. Yes, I mean, I do try to make it so that the fact that this is Stardew Valley is like not totally a legit. But I enjoy, playing Stardew Valley. I don't have a ton of time for video games, so I like to, because technically, like, this is literally my job, right? I'm like the co-director of this nonprofit, and part of our sort of like educational outreach is to do these streams, and it's fun to sneak in a little bit of video game time in there for a good purpose, right? Because it gives us an opportunity to talk. Yes, exactly. We have this tangent emote for a reason. Okay, this is one of the other things is I liked this chart a lot on third places. So we have 3 columns: consumer needs, place meaning, and loyalty outcomes. And the first row says physical. So this is consumer needs: physical, food, prices, ambient conditions, space layout, signs, symbols, and artifacts. And then under this one, when it comes to place meaning, it's place as practical. So when, a third place sort of has these aspects, it will generate a sense that a place is practical. And the loyalty outcomes are cognitive loyalty. I'm more likely to shop at a store or a grocery store or, a bookstore that physically feels good to be at if, the prices are right too, because it's got to include that. Then we have the consumer need, the social level: remedy or prevent social loneliness through companionship. The place meaning is a place as gathering, and the loyalty outcomes is community loyalty. So this has to be the next place of like developing a good third place, or the next aspect of developing a good third place. It has to be able to, create antidotes to loneliness. It needs to have the ability to generate things like spontaneous meetups, spontaneous conversation, but also a sense of regularity, companionship, frequently seeing the same people over and over again, even if you don't really develop that much of a friendship, still is beneficial. And then that leads to people feeling a sense of community and wanting to have more interaction there. And then the consumer need on the emotional level: remedy or prevent emotional loneliness through emotional support. And then the place meaning, this becomes place as home, and this creates sort of ultimate loyalty. So this is, I recommend actually reading through this. I mean, these are all pretty long. I don't remember how many pages this was. So let's look at place, the social dimension. I just want to read this section real quick. So in contrast to the plethora of research on the impact of physical environment stimuli on consumer behavior, considerably less is known about the influence of social stimuli, which refers to customers or employees in a consumption setting. Sorry, I said this is like very, consumer focused, but I still think it's got interesting points. Notably, Bichner, 1992, argued that every consumption setting is composed of physical, social, and natural stimuli. However, she focused on the conceptualization of a place's physical dimension. Toombs and McConnell-Kennedy, 2003, conceptualized a social service-scape as being composed of 5 customer-centric factors that may influence a customer's approach or avoidance behavior. However, other researchers, Baker, Growell, and Parasuraman, 1994, Baker, Levy, and Growell, 1992, interpreted a consumption setting social element as being composed of the number and the affability of employees in the settings, which have been shown to influence consumers' assessment of pleasure inside a consumption setting and of store quality. So the point here of this paragraph is to basically say different researchers have tried to create different ways of categorizing creation of place and meaning and like third place development as also related to consumer behavior, which is kind of whatever, but it's also true that like to maintain a lot of these third places, they need to be economically viable. So it is not completely useless. And then the last point here, the one thing that I think is interesting is that I don't think it's really going to it might alleviate loneliness in the short term, but not necessarily create real companionship when the primary interactions are between consumers and employees versus places that generate, different types of social interactions, right? And it's kind of interesting because I think in some cases it depends on very much culture, and it can vary even from like one neighborhood to another neighborhood. Some places, if you're at a grocery store and like someone else in the same aisle as you strikes up conversation, people are going to look at them like they're, a serial killer. But in other places, that might be more allowable, and that would be able to help generate a little bit more community. But if the primary interaction is between the consumer and the store and the sort of like person at the cash register, that is a very much like a bit of an extractive relationship a lot of the time. Not necessarily, but it can be. And it's also one in which it is not always that consensual because the employee cannot leave that space. So it's really easy for them to get cornered and for it to become not a very consensual interaction because they can't really set boundaries with a customer a lot of the time. And so I think that that's not really a good way of measuring this. Okay, instead of emphasizing a place's employees or customers, researchers in disciplines outside of marketing, including environmental psychology and humanistic geography, note that places are composed of not only physical features, but also observable activities, functions, meanings, which often arise from social relationships between people. So this is getting more interesting. It's looking at other types of research, and I think if you have time, checking out these two other papers, or four papers that are being, yes, also do not hit on people that are working, absolutely eroded. These 4 other papers that are mentioned can be pretty useful. I haven't had time to look at them. For example, Gustafsson, 2001, posited that places often become meaningful to people because of their relationship with people living there, such as friends, acquaintances, and relatives. The humanistic geographer Yi-Fu Chuan believed that a place becomes meaningful when people identify a place as a sign of something beyond itself, we read this quote earlier. For example, a person may identify a barbershop as a place to satisfy a consumption need. Another person may identify the same barbershop as a home, referring to a place in which he or she finds refuge and a sense of belonging by being among other people. Environmental and community psychologists have primarily investigated the concept of home in a residential context. Yet, Oldenburg pointed out that third place regulars typically perceive the place as their home away from home and as a place in which they can socially regenerate among friends. Thus, if consumers maintain social relationships in a commercial establishment, the meanings they instill in the place may transform it from a place of consumption to a place of significance, namely a home. However, a theoretical understanding of how and why consumers transform third places into significant centers of their lives remains unknown. This chasm is addressed in the following section. And I'm going to not read the rest of this for today, because we're going to look at a relational third place theory, which I think is really where it gets more interesting. So we'll save that for next time. But I want to come back to this article just a little bit on some more advice for making friends. So attend social gatherings. Consider attending a book club. Reach out to like-minded people and see if they might want to connect. If you just moved to a new city, seek groups of people who share your hobbies. For example, you might join a gym, take a jewelry making class, or enroll in a foreign language class. So the problem with all of these things, though, is it's still these are not very structured, and it still puts a lot of pressure on we should go and approach strangers, right? If you go to a bar or a club or, the gym or something, you kind of have to approach strangers
And like classes can be really useful, but again, the kinds of relationships they can develop there are maybe harder, I think. Sometimes it can be really useful because it's the structured interaction. You know, like for me doing swing dance, going to swing dances and chatting with people in between dancing, or like, you know, dancing with someone and having a nice time and then talking to them a little bit afterwards, was a really good way because it was very structured interaction. We all had a similar understanding of what kinds of behaviors we should and shouldn't be doing there. And there was an idea of like a time limit to these interactions. So it was really pressure reduced. And that can be really helpful. Some things that I think can also be, and the other thing I'll say about swing dancing, because there's a lot of people who are both very shy and very introverted who do swing dancing, it's entirely structured, and you don't have to talk to anybody, but you can still get the benefit of like doing an activity with other people. Like you ask somebody to dance, or you wait to be asked to dance, and that can be like the extent of your talking to strangers. Maybe you say thank you at the end if you're being polite. But it can be nice. But there are also meetup groups, and I don't just mean like on the website meetup, though that one's good, for, you know, people who don't have a lot of friends, who maybe are feeling really lonely. And that can be nice. You know, those can be kind of less pressure. I think that it's also one of the things that a lot of people, for example, in the furry community or cosplay or LARPing can really like, is you can, for a time, take on a different identity while having a structured interaction or a contained interaction with other people. And it can also, I think, sometimes feel like less pressure. Okay, the next point, connect with people you already know. You might already have a phone number for a potential new friend in your contacts lists. Perhaps you could connect on a deeper level with one of your coworkers. Maybe you could rekindle a relationship with an old friend from high school. In the age of social media, you can easily reach out to people you know, even in a tangential way. So this, I think, is true. And I think that not calling people is kind of hardcore sometimes, especially like, I think a lot of people don't like calling. But messaging people on social media, especially if you know that they live in the same area as you, even if you don't know them that well, and asking if like they want to go see a movie with you as friends, or, you know, come over for dinner sometime, or, you know, I like to invite people to go for a walk in the park. One of the things that I also think is really good to do there to maybe alleviate some uncertainty and anxiety that can come up is to set time boundaries at the beginning. You know, I can really have a tendency to I don't have a good sense of time. And I also can really be comfortable with like whatever state I'm in, kind of just continuing. So to make sure I respect myself, but also the other person, and also that I don't like wear out my welcome in social interactions, I like to try to set time boundaries at the beginning and say things like, okay, so it's like 2 p.m. now, and I have to leave by 5. And then when 5 comes around, one of the skills that I've learned is leaving before you're ready to leave is often really good. If you wait to leave a social interaction until you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for this to be done, that's going to do a couple of things. It's probably going to make you feel less good about yourself or the interaction. You're going to probably create a stronger association with the idea that social activities are draining or difficult. But it's also going to potentially, you know, make it less pleasant. Whereas if you leave when you and the other people involved are still like, oh, it would be nice to continue this, it keeps it nice. And Muscled Karma, you said good idea on the time boundary. I'm bad at that. Yeah, it's something I practice a lot, and I'm trying to get better at, because I can really like keep people trapped in conversation. It's like definitely a bad habit I have, especially if I'm like info dumping and I don't always recognize when people are not interested in the thing I'm info dumping about. I get a lot of that energy out on these streams. It's very helpful, but creating certain types of boundaries ends up being really helpful. And it takes practice to get good at it. Aradin,
Also, in regards to third places, I think media has made it harder as it has cast many places like libraries as uncool. I totally agree. And places to avoid unless you have to. Often media only portrays places of consumption as good or acceptable hangout places. Exactly. And places of consumption can be fine hangout places if you're allowed to linger, if you're allowed to actually like be there and linger, and they're affordable, and they're comfortable, pleasant places to be in. And that can be a really tough thing to sort of balance between the different needs. So this is all coming around to say that if you struggle with friendships, it's not likely to be your fault, because we don't teach people the skills of how to maintain friendships, first of all. Like, schools almost never go into like how to have, consensual, sustainable relationships of any kind with each other. Most of the time, when parents or schools intervene in friendships, it's to say these two people can no longer associate with each other because the influence they have on each other. Almost nothing is done to like teach us or even support the development of friendships. Not having public transit is also a really big thing. Everybody being really decentralized, people likely living very far away from each other and not having public transit, and then needing to travel and like by car to get to each other, and then not having any sort of like centralized place to go. It's hard if you just go, if the only real option you have is to like go to a restaurant, which can be expensive and like kind of limits you to going at meal times, or like spending time at meal times. And then what are you going to do before or after? Or, planning things that are sort of more logistically intense. Like, we're going to go together to like this park that's kind of far away, but is really nice. That's fine. You can do that sometimes. But if that's like the one of the main things you have as options to hang out, that means that there's going to be another barrier to ease of hanging out. It's one of the things that I think about this a lot in the context of also like ADHD and trying to stay organized. I try to pay close attention to things like drop zones in my house. Like, where am I likely to create a pile of stuff? Like, I have a drop zone by the front door. Like, I come in, I tend to put down my bag, I tend to take off my jacket and just kind of throw it, and my shoes, and I just kind of leave it all there, and the mail. And that's a drop zone. So instead of just letting it stay that way, or instead of trying to push myself into another shape and say, no, all of the stuff has to like go in this closet, I would say, in the drop zone, once I can see that there's a pattern here, I'm going to build some structure so that there aren't a ton of extra steps. Because with ADHD, every step you add to a routine you're trying to build, the greater the risk of it not taking, the greater the risk that you're just not going to be able to do it or to maintain it. But that also includes with developing things like relationships and building habits into our life, even if you don't have ADHD. The more steps there are to like doing something, the more likely you're going to talk yourself out of it, or you're going to feel anxious about it because there's all of these things that can go wrong, or it's going to make you tired just planning it. And I think this also adds to one of the reasons why a lot of us can feel really relieved when plans get canceled, because it often then means all of this stuff that we were like holding in our working memory of like steps that I have to follow to get to this plan suddenly are no longer necessary. This also includes like, even if there is public transit, but it's so infrequent, or you have connections and the connections might not meet up well, needing to look up schedules and really plan out the route. I live in Vienna, and the public transit here is so good such that I never have to look at schedules. The most I will ever have to wait for a train is if I'm going outside of the city, and it's maybe 20, 30 minutes on a Sunday or holiday. And otherwise, it's 3 minutes is the average that I will wait for another train if I miss one. So I don't have, like, I might look up the route because I might be like, okay, I don't know how to get which line is the fastest. So I might look up the route, but that's all I have to do. I just look at what stop I get on and get off at. And if I transfer, I don't actually have to look at timetables. I don't actually really have to care about planning. I just go. And that means that all of that extra barrier to feeling like it's going to be easy and enjoyable to do this thing is reduced. So this is a huge part of it. Um, Jan Punkt, you said, I had Disney teen movies in mind earlier, as they may have socialized young people in the 2000s and 2010s with certain ideals of friendship. I think so. I mean, like, I know for me, I used to like not only struggle with friendships, but my model of what I wanted as a friend was like from anime, and like that's just never gonna happen. So I used to be like, I'm so lonely. I just want this like anime friendships, and it was just like I don't think even most romantic partners like each other that much. So like, and are that like together? It's a fantasy. So I relate. And Aradan, you said the other problem with getting back out there is that often if you do make a connection, you are so desperate for that connection as you've been wanting it for so long that you can easily overwhelm other people. I used to have this problem a lot. I think that that's a common problem. One possible solution to it, I think, is just to call it out, just to name it. And that doesn't always work. Sometimes that can actually really backfire, but sometimes naming it can help people understand why you might be acting the way you're acting. For me, one of the things I've been doing is really naming the fact that after, 3 years of basically staying locked down, because I don't really go out that often. If I see people, I only see people outside in public spaces because I'm still trying not to get COVID. I'm out of practice for like, this kind of conversation is not even good practice because it's very much me monologuing, which is like the thing I try not to do in like in-person interactions. And so for me, I like to point it out, but again, sometimes if you point that out, people can judge you or be like less comfortable with it. So that was my feeling about it, is if like people are going to be that judgmental with their head up their asses that much, like I don't want to be their friend. But at the same time, if people don't have any other context for you, that could also be rough. Yeah, Jan Pooked, yes, exactly. Depending on the anime, the people there might be better friends than people in our world, for sure. Okay, so getting connected to the people you already know can be a nice tool to use. The next one, get outside your comfort zone. We kind of talked about a little bit why this is dicey. And I want to yes and it. Like, yes, it is dicey. And if the way that you live your life now is not creating friends, probably that means something has to change. Now, again, a lot of this is not going to be your fault because a lot of it, I mean, none of it's your fault, but a lot of this is going to be stuff outside of your control, is what I want to say. Because it's going to be structural things and like cultural expectations or people just not having time, especially once people start having children, especially for the first few years of childhood, they can be really focused on that. It is also simultaneously true that new parents tend to be incredibly lonely, like more lonely than any other time in their life because they don't tend to get invited to things and people tend to not want to hang out with them as much. Krellin, I would absolutely transform into a sailor suited warrior for any of my friends. I love it. So basically, if the way you live your life now is not resulting in friendships, it can be helpful to try to live a different way sometime. Do something a little different. So it's normal to feel some amount of social anxiety when trying to make new friends. Making small talk with a stranger can be nerve-wracking for anyone. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, do your best to implement positive social skills, which I don't really like this because I'm like, what does that even mean? Positive social skills. And you can just say it. Positive social skills take practice. Use open body language. They do have a link to explain what this is, but it's on how to read body language, which is always pretty hit or miss. Make eye contact, which is also really cultural. There are a lot of places in the world where making a lot of eye contact is not recommended. Listen as much as you speak. This is generally a good idea, and this is something I definitely struggle with. always be yourself regardless. This one is also a mixed bag because if, how do I say this? I was the kind of person who used to do the well actually and info dump a lot. And there were years where once I started to realize that that was a big reason why I didn't have any friends, I thought, well, whatever, I'm not going to change myself for people. Like, I'll just find people who are like me. And it didn't really happen. But it also, I had to kind of look at myself and say, why is it people don't like this? And I asked some people, and they basically just said that I made them feel stupid, or they felt alienated, or they felt like I wasn't listening to them. And so I was like, okay, I don't think they're stupid. I don't want to alienate them, and I am listening to them. So if the way in sort of communication theory, there's this whole idea of like you have sort of several points in how communication is done, and a problem can arise or something that interferes with communication can arise at any of these points. So you have like the thoughts, the ideas that the first person has, the way that they say them or the way that they communicate them, the context in which the thing is happening, the way the person receiving the message receives it, and then the thoughts that they have as a response. And I realized that like what was going wrong is communicating and acting in the ways that I did was sending a message mediated through cultural context that was not the message I wanted to be sending. I can't change the cultural context. So all I could do was slowly shift my behavior a little bit while still being true to myself, like not trying to just radically change myself as a person, but trying to say, okay, within who I am and how I like to interact in the world, can I create some structures so that I don't make people feel bad because I don't want to have that impact. And I am having that impact and I need to accept that. So a lot of the time what I learned to do was I would only really offer up information, and generally speaking, when I'm not teaching and I'm not in that specific kind of context, if I want to share information like that or correct somebody, I always ask first, like, can I share some information with you that you might find helpful? Or can I share something with you that you might think is interesting? And a lot of the time, just slowing it down, like that's a good consent skill, which is often slowing things down a little bit and asking, even if someone doesn't like what you have to say afterwards, the simple act of asking often means people feel better about the information they receive. And this can also, be something that has a lot to do with giving advice. Like people don't like unsolicited advice, but if they give consent to receive the advice, they're less likely to be upset with it. Okay. So be yourself is, I am also yes-anding that, which is like, be true to yourself. Don't betray yourself, but also think of within who I am, are there places where I might want to create some structure to make sure I'm having the impact that I want to have. Yeah. And pursue your interests. You'll have an easier time meeting your next best friend if you both share similar interests. When you meet someone on the same wavelength as you, it's easier to form an organic bond. Many social gatherings revolve around people coming together in light of a common goal or passion. For example, if you're an athlete, try joining an amateur sports team. If you like comedy, give an improv class a try. I mean, one of the other problems here is like this assumes money, and like economics is a huge barrier to friendship. Oh, hello, Mo2277. Thank you for the follow. So economics is going to be a huge barrier to friendship. I don't really like this article. Like, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up, because so much of the advice on like how to make friends, one does not look at structural factors, doesn't really give you any tips for like, if it is my behavior that is alienating people, how do I know? And how do I figure it out? And it also doesn't really, it assumes a lot. They often really assume a lot. So a lot of this advice is like, yes, and these things can help. But if you don't have context where it's appropriate, if you don't look at the structural factors, it's the same as like, the advice of like, stop buying lattes and you'll save more money. It's like, okay, but if like I'm barely making enough to pay my bills or keep my house, like, not buying a coffee every like, once in a while because it feels nice is not really going to change anything. So the thing is here, you have to have money for a lot of this kind of stuff. And when I was a swing dance organizer, our organization specifically tried to be as affordable as possible. Most swing dances would be like 15 to 25 bucks for a night, and that was not affordable for me. Whereas our model was $10 a month, and that got you a dance every Monday and a practice space every Tuesday, and then like discounts at other places and other perks that we had. And which also included classes, right? Because classes are also often prohibitively expensive. And the $10 a month included classes. And so we made it very, very affordable as we could, because we still had to pay to like rent the venue and pay the teachers and pay the DJ and have insurance. But that kind of let us operate at cost. So yeah, exactly. Aradin, or not Aradin, Krellin. An extra $750 a year is not the line between poor and not poor. And Aradin, you said, or Jan Punkt eye contact is also something pretty neurotypical, for sure, for sure. Aradin, I'm guessing that part of this is due to my growing cynicism, but the more I hear about this person and their thoughts, they just come off as dismissive and very much, this is easy for me, so just do these things and you'll be great. It worked for me, so it should work for you. I would say it's probably less that and more just this kind of format, right? Like an article, like all of the sort of research on like writing online content says that if a person has to take more than 10 minutes to read your article, they're not finishing it. And so you should keep it short. And things need to be like really simple and bite-sized. And so you don't get a lot of nuance there. And I think a lot of people, the nuances of like actually show up for each other and actually be willing to like be there for each other in meaningful ways and, like intentionally hold space for each other and make time for each other. And what do those things actually look like? That's a book, right? That's not an article. And yeah. And Aradin, it is a little bit like a doctor just telling you to exercise more and eat better. And again, like even if those things can help, they're often not talking about anything structural. They're not talking about what the context is for the person. And they're also not talking about what does it actually mean for this individual? What is to exercise more and eat better, right? Like how do you actually create that structure? And if you're living in a place that's entirely car centric and there aren't places to go or they're unaffordable and you have no time because you're working multiple jobs, well, that advice isn't going to help because you literally cannot take any of it, even if it's the question of even if it is going to help, right? Like it's a lot of times doctors give that advice as a way of dismissing somebody rather than actually trying to help. But that's another topic. We can talk about things like fat phobia and disability phobia, ableism in the medical industry, another stream. Use apps suited to social connection. I'm not even gonna read that one. This one, how to be a good friend, I think is a little bit more useful, which is handling conflict with grace. Like a lot of the time we tend to treat conflict as something that we have to avoid at all costs. But we also often treat conflict as though if it happens in a relationship, it means the relationship is over. And when we act like that towards conflict, we make our relationships a lot more fragile because human drama is inevitable. Anybody you know for long enough and have enough interactions with them, there are going to be things that come up where something's going to be inappropriate or offensive, or like someone's going to let someone down or break a promise or, just do something that's rude and they don't necessarily even know why they did it. Like these things happen. And if you have we also don't get a lot of practice with actually like working through conflict, especially like coming from the point of we're on the same team. Like if you're my friend, I want to have the best possible friendship with you, and I want to know what that can look like. So if conflict comes up between us, I want to work through it from the perspective of we're on the same team. We both want to be in this friendship. It's also how I approach romantic relationships. It has worked better in my romantic relationships and my friendships because a lot of the time people are just not that invested in the friendships. We also have a tendency to, it's almost like the Tinder syndrome, but for friendships, where we have this idea that there are endless possibilities out there. Therefore, like if a friendship isn't perfect and isn't easy right away, then we should just set it aside for the next one, which again makes these things a lot more fragile. And again, the lack of third places, lack of infrastructure, lack of a sense of community, lack of solidarity, lack of the ability to have mutual aid for each other. This also serves the interests of powerful people who don't want collective action to happen. And that makes us all more precarious. This is also related to, I need to start playing the game in a second. Another idea I want to talk about in the future, which is this New York Times article I found called Who Will Care for Kinless Seniors? And it's basically more and more people who are old have no family and also no friends. And not just family, like they also in this article talk about friendships and how, you know, even people who cohabitate as friends are not likely to receive essential social, logistical, or emotional support from each other. And I think that we'll look at this article in a future stream, but it's here's the link in case you are interested. Yeah. So then here, the other thing, keep your word. Trust is important, and you have to be able to prove that you are actually trustworthy. The best way to do that is consistency and time. A lot of the time people think that trust is this thing that comes from like big displays or like that because we know our intentions and that like our intentions are good, that it's clear to other people. But trust is something that really, even among people who are pretty, trusting from the beginning, real deep trust takes time and takes consistency. And if you find that you've not been consistent, the best thing that you can do is call it out and apologize. This is often something that I really want to encourage people to do in general. If you realize you've crossed somebody's boundaries, broken a social norm, done something that was like not consistent or, whatever, don't wait until the other person finds it to be a problem to sort of bring it up. Like a good example of this is, generally speaking, most people don't like it if someone reads over their shoulder when they're, say, texting or writing an email. But on occasion, it is true that someone can accidentally see things. I have had occasions where I wasn't trying to read over someone's shoulder. A word caught my eye, and suddenly I was looking at what they were saying. And I always, as a way to be consensual in this friendship, say, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to, but I accidentally read some of what you're typing, and I'm going to go sit over here now so I can make sure I don't do it again. And, I'm very sorry. And that's following some basics of how to make a good apology. And it shows trustworthiness as well. The fact that you're willing to state when you did something that was maybe crossing a boundary, the fact that you're able to admit mistakes is a way to prove trustworthiness. But also, like, don't gossip and stuff. There's a difference between like trying to process a social interaction or decompress from one, or to like analyze something with someone else, and gossiping. And a lot of it comes down to like, what's the point? If I go to a party and if my partner and I go to a party, for example, afterwards we often like to decompress with each other about it. We like to rehash what happened during the party. What did we say? What did they say? What do we think about this? As a way to just sort of process with each other. Or if I'm having difficulties with someone, my partner and I will often talk about it, but it's not for the sake of gossiping. It's for the sake of processing and understanding and thinking of ways forward. Whereas gossiping is very much done in a way that's not for the sake of a deeper understanding. It does have motivation that's often to create a greater sense of in-group, out-group, or even to create a sense of power over another person. And that's not great. Maintain balance. This is really important, and this is one of those things where I think talking about it can be really important. I've had friendships where it became really one-sided in the sense that I was once friends with someone and they lived only like a 10-minute drive from me, but it was like an hour and 20-minute bus ride. And if we hung out, they often wanted to go to this mall that was like a 5-minute drive from their place, but was like an hour bus ride for me. And they were never willing to like meet me halfway or come to me. And I offered to like split the cost of gas with them. And I got kind of sad about that. So I eventually talked to them about it. I just said, hey, I really love you and I love hanging out with you and I really cherish this. And I have recognized I am starting to feel some resentment that I don't want to grow. And that's coming from the fact that I feel that I am spending a lot more time to come see you than you spend to come see me. It takes me over an hour to get here for you, whereas it would take you only 10 minutes to drive to me. And I want to understand why. Like, I want to understand, like, what's your perspective on this? What is the thing that makes you hesitate to come to me or to meet me halfway? And can we find some solutions? So I, sort of describe the situation very clearly. I express the impact that the situation is having, and I ask for something very directly, like, I want to understand why. Can we talk about this? And then the next step I could do is to say, like, as long as we talk about this, I'll feel a lot better. And I reinforce that. So, this won't be negative on our friendship in the long term. And that's really important. But people can feel really afraid to actually be honest with each other in these ways. And that really hampers the development and maintenance of friendships and relationships of any kind. And reach out on the regular. This is also, I think, regular contact. Remember I said there's research that says that you actually have to like intentionally hang out at least like 10 or 15 times before you move from acquaintances to friends. And then it's like another 20 times to go from like friends to good friends. But regular contact can be really useful. And that can be something as simple as sending them a Facebook message that says, hey, dude, what's up? Or here's a meme that made me think of you. Or here's this funny thing I saw. Isn't this hilarious? Or I like to send ones that just say, like, I'm thinking of you. I hope you're having a good day. And that is a way to make sure that you also stay in the other person's mind, but you also anchor in your mind that this is an actual connection that you have with somebody else. So setting around the rest of this, the last one here is like share experiences. That means like build experiences together and believing that you're like worth having friends. Also good advice, but I agree with you, Rodden. This doesn't actually like make me want to take this class or to take this kind of class, but I think it was still a good one to start with. And I do think that I want to come back to this idea of third places being an essential structural tool for the maintenance of friendship, community, mutual aid, solidarity. If we don't have these places of building connection, we're not going to build stuff. All right, let's play some Stardew Valley for the last 20 minutes. I might go a little longer, it depends on the rest of the evening. While I get Stardew Valley up, I do want to take this time to just let you all know that we have our upcoming calendar. We have our Consent Basics class tonight. That'll be about an hour from now. It'll start. If you're interested in coming to that, you can just send us an email at theconsentacademy@gmail.com. And we can send you the Zoom link for that because our Consent Basics classes are always free. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. We have a class on personal accountability for leadership coming up this weekend. You don't have to be in a formal position of leadership to benefit from it. Then we have another Consent Basics that's more American or North American friendly time coming up on the 15th.
And keep an eye out for our future classes. Our 2023 calendar is up. It's not totally up. We were going to add more things to it, but this is the basics. We do have different discussion groups, including women's, men's, trans and non-binary, and a BIPOC discussion group. Those are also free. We do have a Patreon. I usually just like promote the Patreon here, but if you're interested, I just wanted to show you all. I'm hoping that we can at some point get to $200 a month, because that would really help us for paying our volunteers through a stipend. Right now, we don't really get enough money to pay our bills and also pay our volunteers. So I would like to get a bit more so we can do that. But we have a lot of good articles and exclusive content, like what to do when you read about a consent violation on the internet, how informed consent can create more adventure, a letter to Kinksters. We have a podcast that my co-director and I are doing, and a lot of other really good content on here. So check that out if you're interested. And the other thing I want to say is we have a book. If you're looking for if you're looking for a Christmas gift or any holiday gift, I recommend this book. You can get it on Kindle for $9 or $15, and we wrote it. It's very good. All right, so let's go on to some gameplay. Let's play some Stardew Valley. As usual, give me a second to get it finished getting it set up. I always need a moment. Yeah, I would just like always have it running in the background, but it just doesn't work out very well if I do that. It just really creates some problems if I have too many things going on. My computer's really fast. It just starts to like get confusing for me personally if there's like too much going on. Okay, let's see. Does this look good? Not quite. It's a little off. Why is it like that? I don't understand this like ratio here. You know what? That's good enough. That's good enough. Rodney said, was there a year when all your friends and family got that book for the holidays? You know, I try to do it a little at a time. The book, we didn't write it that long ago, but yeah, I do tend to give it out as a gift, especially to people. Yes, thank you, Arad, for the moderation. And Jan Fung just said even the best computers will have a hiccup here and there. Yes. All right. So let's talk about this. First, I want to see if I can go to the skull mines. No, somewhat mildly perturbed. That's fine. Oh, yes, it's Evelyn, my favorite. Good morning, dear. You're gonna give me cookies? I'm so excited. It was a lovely walk out here. I haven't seen this old farm in a long time. It looks even better than I remember. Here, I brought you a little something. It's a gift from one gardener to another. So this is, I think, a great thing that you can do. Don't let internet discourse make you think that occasionally, unprompted, offering your neighbors delicious baked goods is weird. They might say no, and you have to accept that, and it's totally okay. And it's always a good idea to let people know as you offer something that they're under no obligation to accept it, because sometimes people can feel pressured. It's also good if you make food for somebody to include a full list of the ingredients in case people have any allergies or sensitivities. But generally, it's a nice thing to do. I like to make cookies and muffins and stuff for my neighbors. It goes really a long way. Or sometimes I buy just like a bunch of oranges and like leave them out front with like a take free or something, because it just creates a positive vibe in the building. And even though I like don't really know any of them, I know I talk a lot about how you should know your neighbors, and I don't really know any of my neighbors because sometimes the things I talk about on this stream are also messages to me, things I need to remember. But yeah, this is good. This is good. Okay.
All right, so it's not cookies. It is an indoor garden pot, but it's also still nice. Little gifts can go a long way. That was a very common thing in Japan when I lived there, is like people would often leave little gifts on my door in like a little bag, especially if my neighbors knew I were sick. They'd often leave me like some, like medicine and like a, thing to put on my forehead and, like a little cake or something. Okay. These pots are really handy. You can use them to grow crops of any season indoors. They also look nice outside, but out here they can only house in-season crops. If you need more, they're really easy to make too. Here I've got an old magazine clipping with the instructions. Learned how to craft a garden pot. So this is great. I'm going to keep these in the greenhouse. Oh, Detibron, you asked, am I still planning on doing the Kumare screening? I have decided not to do it on Twitch because I didn't really like how the Twitch interface was working, and Kumare was not actually available on Prime. I would have to rent it, and then I couldn't stream it. So keep an eye on the Discord. And I'll have more info there. And if you're not in the Discord, the way to get access to it is to either take our Consent for Leadership series or join our Patreon. $3 a month, even if you just do it for 1 month and cancel, it gets you access to our Discord. We have moderators that are our volunteers, and I haven't been as active on it as I want. I'm sorry. I mean to catch up on things, and it's just so much happening. Okay, anyway, Evelyn. Well, I'd better go. George gets grumpy if he doesn't have his oatmeal on time. You have a great day, honey. You know what? Oatmeal sounds kind of like a good thing for dinner. All right, I gotta say hello to my animals. So, one of the things that's nice is this town is small enough that it does allow for some spontaneity. If we look at time, right, like I've kind of mapped it out a while ago. If you think about like in-game time passing as you move, it seems as though the longest distance it would take to get between one place and another was about an hour and a half to get from like the furthest part of the town to the one part to another, which is not great. But if you're considering it like going through the woods to get to another part of the woods, like from the southern lake to the northern lake, it being about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah, the consent cow. That's not that bad. It would be good if there were more infrastructure. Oh man, look at this. I'm kind of distracted by how many things there are to pick up today. It's kind of nice. I feel good about the farm. So this is also one of those things, I try to talk about it on and off, but one of the things I like about a lot of these video games, and one of the things that I think they do for a lot of people, is something we talked about in the Surviving the Holidays stream, is that a way to, increase your sort of resilience to distress and, difficult situations is to increase your baseline self-esteem. And one of the ways you can do that is through building a sense of mastery. And so anytime it doesn't mean you have to be like a master at something. It can just be things that make you feel like you've got some kind of thing going on in your life, basically. Is this an empty spot? I think it is. And one of the ways you can do that is, do I have 12 days? No, I don't have enough time for that. Ooh. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna leave it. Gonna get some of these blueberries in my in my greenhouse. Sorry, I'm very distracted today, as usual. I know I am always distracted, but anyway, it's what was I even talking about? I don't even remember what I was talking about, y'all. Do I have my hoe? Nope. Bummer. Sense of mastery. There we go. That's what I was talking about. I was like, I was talking about something I really enjoy talking about. What was it? Sense of mastery. So what do I mean by that? Well, it doesn't have to be being good at something. That's often what people think, but it can just be anything that gives you a sense of, meaning, a sense of like, I'm doing something with my time. And that's really useful. Again, it doesn't have to be mastery. It can just be, hey, I have a way in which I'm getting better at something and I am contributing something. And I think one of the reasons why games like Stardew Valley are so popular is because they do generate that kind of feeling. Like as you become more productive at things and as you, increase your crop output or whatever, it tends to feel good. It tends to feel like, oh, look at this. I'm like doing something. I'm seeing things grow. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people actually like gardening and small scale farming. But what did you say, Aradin? Consent is too young to produce milk. Is Stardew Valley a case where you can be a victim of your own success? Yes, absolutely. I would definitely say yes. I agree with Ditchipron. You can be a victim of your own success in this game. You can get like so overwhelmingly busy that you don't do anything except farm and harvest crops. So yeah, things that give you a sense of contributing, of having any kind of mastery, of succeeding in any kind of way, really good for you. They're good for just building resilience, making it easier for you to deal with difficulty. It's a good idea. I'm gonna make some blueberry wine here. Do I have melons to make melon jam? Nice. The rest of it I'm gonna put in there. Okay, good. Sweet. So building a sense. Yeah, an anti-growth model would be interesting in this game. I think it would be nice to do like a degrowth model at some point of this game, but it's also kind of difficult because there's like an anti-capitalist one where like you don't sell anything or something, or you don't buy anything, I think is what it is. Like you only function off of things you're given. And I think that that's interesting. I've seen some people do interesting runs in this game. And that's not how I wanted to play it this time, but I can see why people might want to. Okay, let's see. I'm going to sell this milk. I'm going to sell this mayo. Wine. Great. Yeah, I think that there's like a don't buy anything run that people like to do. Today's the 19th. Is it anybody's birthday? Let me look. Yes, it is Demetrius's birthday. He likes bean hot pot, ice cream, rice pudding, and strawberries. I don't have any of that. All eggs, except for void eggs, are likes. So I could do that. I might be able to buy him an ice cream, though. Maybe I can go do that. Let's see. I got time. Let's go get Demetrius some ice cream. But yeah, it's building a sense of mastery can be really useful to building a good sense of self-esteem. Okay, so let's continue back to what we were talking about before, which is like friendships and a sense of place. So there is definitely a big variety in how welcome people feel, like the villagers in this town feel, and how Connected. Wow, it's already 6. What? Oh, I got my ice cream. Yes, Demetrius, you're my future husband's dad. I gotta impress you. um, anyway, varying degrees. I think we can say George is probably pretty lonely, and he puts a lot on his wife, Evelyn. Evelyn seems to be pretty cheerful. I think, she's got a pretty positive mental attitude and everything. And not everybody's doing well. And you got people like the Wizard who definitely are like, I'm off and I'm doing my own thing. Oh, yes. I got a scene with my future husband. Sebastian. Oh, hello, Ariel. What? You haven't seen my motorcycle before? I guess I haven't shown it to you. Sometimes after sundown, I make the long ride out of Stardew Valley. There's nothing else like it, blazing along the empty stretch of road towards the faint city glow. Once I've saved up enough money, I'm going to head out on my own to the city and beyond. Just me and my bike. There we go. Oil's changed. Hey, maybe I'll take you for a ride someday. That sounds fun. Great. Oh, Ron, I just saw you said consent isn't consenting to being milked yet. I love it. I love it. All right. Oh man, another cutscene. Maru, oh hello there. Thank you for joining Jan Punkt. My dad and I are just testing some soil samples. Don't be shy, we could use a hand actually. Could you watch this beaker for me? I'm gonna grab the last batch of samples. Be right back. I still got the ice cream like in my hands, I'm sure. Bye, Unpunked. Thanks for joining. Thanks for helping out, Ariel. Maru's a good kid. She's my special little girl. I gotta click next. I was waiting. I wouldn't want anything getting in the way of her bright future, you know what I mean? Okay, yeah, Dad, you're telling me not to date your daughter. I get it, I get it. And I'm glad you like my hat, Arun. Just some food for thought to chuckle. Yeah. Hey, sorry about that. I hope you found something to talk about while I was gone. Uh-huh. What does this say? I was just telling Ariel about the soil samples we're testing. Okay, you're just gonna straight up lie to your daughter? Right, Ariel. I'm gonna say nothing. Well, we'd better titrate the solution before it crystallizes on us. Okay, here, Ariel, let me show you how to use the equipment. So yeah, lying is a pretty non-consensual thing to do, generally speaking. All right, Demetrius. Oh, a birthday gift. That's very kind of you. I love it. And look, I got the achievement. Maybe I was being a little presumptuous earlier. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, you were, for sure. All right. Construct farm buildings. I want to get... Oh, how much is a stable? Oh man, 100 hardwood, okay. Deluxe coop. Houses 12. Yes, I need 20,000 gold, 500 wood, and 200 stone. All right. Gotta save up for that because I want to get rabbits. So thinking about the structure in this town, right? It's still pretty walkable. I mean, living all the way up in the mountains, let's actually just chart it. Let's just see how long it takes. If I stand in front of their door, I'll wait till it becomes, okay, 2:40. We're gonna leave right now and we're gonna see how long it takes us to get to the center of town. So just over 10 minutes to get to the community center. 20 minutes, about 30 minutes to get to Pierre's. Let's say 35, 40 minutes to get to the Star Drop Saloon. So the fact that this person, or the Robin, Demetrius, and her kids are living in like one of the more remote parts of the town, and it takes about 30, 35 minutes walking to get to the center of town is pretty good, right? Like that's pretty respectable. You could have some kind of public transit. It's harder in rural areas. One of the things that's we were talking about earlier that makes public transit hard in rural areas is lack of centralization. But this town actually does a pretty good job of being quite centralized. Most of the housing is in the inner area. People do still have yards, though they're quite a bit smaller than the people who live out in the more rural spots. Looks like a decent day for fishing, doesn't it? Yes, it does. So it's definitely, you know, less than the places that are further out, but it's still nice. Like people still, a lot of times people talk about wanting yards. I have mixed feelings about single family housing because of the fact that it often, oh, it's cutting out for you. I'm so sorry. Let me look at my OBS information. Oh yeah, sometimes the rate is going down pretty low. I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure why that's happening. Let me do a little Control-Delete and see. My task manager says is up. So I exited out of some background programs that were maybe taking up some of my processing. I don't have my VPN on. You know, I think sometimes the frame rate gets worse because of people coming home from work. And when there are a lot of people on, I think that it gets worse. Choppy for all of y'all. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it like being kilobits per second is not as much as I like it to be. I wish that OBS could give you any kind of information on why. You can still hear me fine, which, okay, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm not sure, because you know, I'm the only person here using my modem. No one else is home. I am plugged in it directly. I don't know why. Sometimes it gets bad. So there is kind of just continuing. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. I have like fiber optic internet and a really fast computer, and sometimes it's still just sad. It's definitely frustrating. I'm sorry. Um, sorry to Tibron. Bye.
Is everybody else having a hard time with bandwidth? If hmm. 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 All right. Well, I'm gonna then go ahead and stop the stream here. Um, Thank you all for joining. Consider following us on social media. Um, yeah, I do see though my kilobits per second is dropping down to 0 sometimes, so I'm not sure why. Uh, yeah, consider following us on social media. Check out our Patreon and our classes. Thank you all again. And talk to you on Sunday. Hey, Kettlestick.